Feel the heavy, titanium pulse of a story that beats with the rhythm of raw ambition and unbreakable resolve. We bring you the most intense cinematic experiences where the human heart meets the cold precision of destiny. Subscribe today and keep your finger on the pulse of greatness. The notification came at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. I know the exact time because I was still at my desk in our Seattle office, cross-referencing Q3 audit files, when my phone lit up with a Google alert I had set on my own name 18 months earlier. I had forgotten I even said it. The alert was for a business filing, a DBA registration in the state of Washington. The business name was Vela Creative Studio. My name was listed as the registered agent. I had never registered a business called Vela Creative Studio. I set my coffee down very carefully, the kind of careful you do when your hands are not entirely steady. I clicked the link. The Secretary of State database loaded, and there it was. My full legal name, my social security number, partially masked but enough, my home address, and at the bottom, a digital signature that looked exactly like mine, submitted 6 weeks ago while I was presenting a licensing audit to a pharmaceutical company in Boston. My best friend had not just borrowed my name, she had built a company with it. Before I tell you what I found inside that company, drop a comment and tell me this. Has someone you completely trusted ever used that trust as a weapon? I read every single one. My name is Claire. I am 31 years old, and for 11 years, I was an intellectual property compliance auditor. I spend my days hunting unauthorized use of patents, trademarks, and licensing agreements. I find the paperwork trails that corporations try to bury. I reconstruct the financial architecture of fraud for a living. And my best friend since the 7th grade, the woman who was the maid of honor at my sister's wedding, the person I had co-signed an apartment lease with in our mid-20s, had just handed me the most personal case I had ever worked. Her name was Daniela. We had met in 7th grade in Austin when she sat next to me in pre-algebra and copied my homework for an entire semester, before I finally told her to just let me teach her the actual math. That was us. I fixed things. She borrowed things. For 20 years, I told myself that was just the dynamic of a long friendship, that the scales did not need to be perfectly balanced to be real. I was wrong about a lot of things. 6 months before that Tuesday night, Daniela had come to me with an idea. She was a graphic designer with real talent and zero business sense, which was not an insult. It was just the truth she would have told you herself. She wanted to launch a branding agency targeting small businesses. Logos, brand identity packages, social media kits. The market was real. Her portfolio was strong. What she needed was startup capital and someone to help her structure the business properly. I had some savings, not a fortune. $42,000 I had been building since I was 24. Money set aside from years of skipping vacations and driving a car I was slightly embarrassed by. I told her I would invest $30,000 as a silent partner, 30% equity. The agreement was a 2-page document I drafted myself, had a notary stamp on it, and kept a copy of in my cloud storage. What I did not know was that Daniela had a different timeline in mind. While I was in Boston for 6 weeks on the pharmaceutical audit, she had taken the $30,000, renamed the company to remove her own name entirely, re-registered it under mine as sole proprietor, opened a business checking account using my identity, and begun invoicing clients. Real clients. 4 of them, all small restaurants and boutique shops in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, paying real money for branding packages she had designed and delivered. She had invoiced them from my name, deposited the payments into an account I did not know existed, and had been operating a business as me for 43 days. I found out on a Tuesday night from a Google alert I had forgotten about. I did not call her. I want to be very clear about that. The person she thought she was dealing with would have called. The Claire from 2 years ago would have dialed her number with shaking hands, and given her a chance to explain before she had even thought through what she was doing. That Claire would have cried first and asked questions second and probably ended up apologizing for something. That Claire went to bed that night and left the auditor in charge. I opened my laptop and started working. The business registration was public record, which meant it had already been filed and time-stamped. The digital signature had been submitted through the state's online portal, which logs IP addresses. I requested the filing details through the public records interface and noted the IP. Then I opened the business license application attached to the DBA filing. It listed a business address. It was Daniela's apartment. I pulled the EIN registration next. She had applied for an employer identification number the same week using my social security number and a phone number I did not recognize. That phone number, when I ran it, traced back to a prepaid carrier account opened in person at a store in the University District. She had been deliberate. She had thought about this. I sat with that for a moment. 20 years of friendship and she had been deliberate about it. I kept going. The business checking account was harder, but not impossible. I could not access the account directly, which I would not have done anyway. What I could do was pull the UCC financing statements filed against the business entity, which were also public record, and identify the financial institution. She had opened the account at a regional credit union 3 blocks from her apartment. I noted the institution's name and moved on. By 2 in the morning, I had a clear picture of the invoicing structure. She had sent 4 invoices totaling $26,800 under my name. 3 had been paid. 1 was outstanding. She had been in operation for 6 weeks and had nearly recouped the entire $30,000 I had invested, depositing it into an account I had no access to. I also found something she had not meant for me to find. One of her clients, a small Ethiopian restaurant called Hailu's Kitchen, had left a Google review for the branding work. They had tagged the business name, Vela Creative Studio, and in their response to the review, Daniela had written back under the business account with a name, not mine, her own. She had slipped. Just once. But it was there, time-stamped, publicly visible, signed Daniela V, Creative Director. The V in Daniela V was her last name initial, Vila. She had named the company after herself and registered it under me. I closed my laptop at 2:47 inches the morning. I did not feel what I expected to feel. There was no wave of grief, no chest-tightening betrayal, no urge to call someone and sob into the phone. What I felt was something quieter and more surgical. It was the same feeling I get when an audit clicks into place, when the discrepancy I have been searching for reveals itself in a single line item and the entire case structure becomes clear. I went to sleep. I had work to do in the morning. The next day I made 3 calls. The first was to an attorney who specialized in identity theft and civil fraud. I had worked with her firm twice on corporate cases. I laid out what I had found in approximately 8 minutes. She told me what I already knew. This was criminal identity theft, unauthorized use of a social security number, and potentially wire fraud if any of the transactions crossed state lines, which at least one had. She told me to document everything before making contact with anyone. I told her I already had. The second call was to the credit union. I asked to speak with their fraud department and explained that an account had been opened using my identity without my authorization. They asked me to come in with identification and a written statement. I told them I would be there by noon. The third call was to my sister, not because I needed her to do anything, because I needed one human being who loved me to know what had happened before I walked into that credit union and made it irreversible. My sister listened without interrupting, which is not something she normally does. When I finished, she said only, "Whatever you need." I said, "Nothing yet." She said, "I know, call me after." The credit union was a quiet, carpeted place with a fish tank in the lobby, and a woman at the fraud desk who looked like she had seen everything twice. I showed her my driver's license, my social security card, and the printed documentation from my audit the night before. She pulled the account. We both looked at it on her screen. $26,800 deposited across 6 weeks. The outstanding invoice had not yet been paid. The current balance, after what I assumed were Daniela's personal withdrawals, was $11,340. The fraud officer froze the account immediately. She told me the bank would conduct their own investigation and that the funds in the account would be held pending resolution. She gave me a case number. I thanked her, and as I was standing to leave, I asked one more question. I asked whether the account had a debit card linked to it. She checked. Yes. Issued 3 weeks ago. Had it been used recently? She looked at the screen. Yes. That morning. At a florist in Eastlake. I thanked her again and walked outside into the gray Seattle drizzle. She had used it that morning. While I was in that credit union freezing the account she had built with my name, she was buying flowers with money she had earned pretending to be me. The detail was so specific, so absurdly ordinary, that I had to stop on the sidewalk for a moment and just breathe. Then I took out my phone and texted her. "Are you free tonight? I want to catch up. It has been too long." She responded in 4 minutes. "Oh my gosh, yes. I feel terrible that we have been so out of touch. Dinner? I know this great new place in Eastlake you have to try." She picked the neighborhood where she had spent my money on flowers that morning. I said, "Perfect. 7 o'clock. You pick the restaurant." She sent me a reservation link to a wine bar called Thistle, the kind of place with small plates and large prices and exposed brick walls that photographs well. I confirmed. Then I forwarded the reservation details to my attorney, who forwarded them to the detective she had contacted at the Seattle Police Department Financial Crimes Unit, who told her that pending the warrant they were processing, an officer would be available to make contact that evening if I could confirm the subject would be present. I confirmed. I want to be honest about what I felt getting dressed that evening, because it was not what I expected. I did not feel powerful. I did not feel vindicated. I felt genuinely sad in a way that sat in my chest like cold water. 20 years. I kept doing the math of it. 7th grade, pre-algebra homework, the apartment lease, her reading at my sister's wedding, the birthday trips, the phone calls at 2 a.m., when her mother was sick. 20 years of a person, and I was about to end it in a wine bar in Eastlake. and there was no version of that which did not cost something real. But I also thought about the clients, the 4 small business owners who had hired someone they believed to be me, who had paid invoices with my legal name on them, who had signed contracts that did not exist in any form they understood. I thought about what would happen if one of them had a dispute, if someone needed to enforce those contracts and found out the name on them belonged to a person who had no idea they existed. I thought about my credit, my professional license, my security clearance, all of which could have been affected by debts or legal actions attached to a business I had never consented to. She had not just stolen from me. She had built a liability structure around my entire professional identity, and she had done it carefully enough that I wondered how long she had been planning it. I arrived at Thistle at 6:58. Daniela was already there, sitting at a corner table with a glass of white wine, wearing the green silk blouse I had told her she looked beautiful in at my sister's wedding. She lit up when she saw me. The smile was completely real. That was the thing I had not been prepared for. The smile was completely, genuinely real. "Claire," she said, standing to hug me, "you look amazing. Boston clearly agreed with you." "Boston was 6 weeks ago," I said, sitting down. "Still, you have that glow." She settled back into her chair, picked up the menu. "I have been meaning to text you about Vila, actually. Things are going so well. I have 4 clients already. One of them is this incredible little restaurant. I think you would love the owner. And I landed a boutique last week. They want a full rebrand." She said it easily, casually, like she was telling me about her day. I set my menu down. "Tell me more about Vila," I said. She talked for 4 minutes without stopping. The vision, the clients, the brand identity packages, the potential to scale. She used the word "we" twice and corrected herself both times, quickly, seamlessly. I watched her face while she talked. There was no flicker of calculation. No tell. She had convinced herself of some version of this that made it acceptable. I had seen that before in fraud cases. The cognitive architecture that people build around their own dishonesty until it becomes a narrative they actually believe. When she finished, I said, "I got a Google alert on my name 6 nights ago." Her hand moved, just slightly, toward her wine glass, then stopped. "For a business registration," I continued. "For a company called Vila Creative Studio, with my legal name, my social security number, my home address. Filed 6 weeks ago while I was in Boston." The color in her face shifted, not all at once. It drained slowly, like a tide going out. "Claire," she started. "I have the filing," I said. "I have the EIN application. I have the IP address from the state portal submission, which traces to a coffee shop 2 blocks from your apartment. I have the account records from the credit union, which I had frozen this morning. I have the 4 client contracts, all executed under my name without my knowledge or consent. I have the review response where you signed as Daniela V., creative director. And I have a case number from the bank's fraud department and an open warrant application from Seattle PD Financial Crimes." She stared at me. "The money," I said, "the 30,000 I invested, the 30% equity, that was real. That was a real agreement with a notarized document. You did not have to do any of this. You could have just run the company we agreed to. You had everything you needed." She opened her mouth. What came out first was not an explanation or an apology. What came out was, "I was going to pay you back when the revenue stabilized." I had expected something. I had not expected that. "Pay me back," I said slowly, "with my own money, deposited into an account you opened with my identity, that you were going to pay me back." The logic of it, I thought, the same logic I had seen in 100 fraud cases, the mental sleight of hand where borrowing without permission becomes a temporary arrangement, where theft becomes a bridge loan, where the victim becomes a passive investor who just doesn't know it yet. "Claire, I know how this looks," she said. "I know how it looks too," I said. "That's why there's an officer outside." She turned. Through the window, visible in the amber light of the wine bar's exterior sign, a plainclothes detective was standing on the sidewalk. Daniela turned back to me. Her eyes were wet now. "You actually called the police on me." "I called the police," I said, "on someone who used my social security number to open a business and a bank account, invoiced clients in my name, and withdrew money from an account I didn't know existed. That person happens to be you." She started to cry, not the performative kind, the real kind. And I want to be honest again. It hurt to watch. It hurt the way it hurts when something you were hoping was not true gets confirmed. Because I had been hoping, even then, even sitting across from her with all of the documentation in my bag, that there was some explanation I had not considered, that I had made an error somewhere in the audit, that the evidence would be wrong. It was not wrong. The detective came in at 7:22, identified himself, and asked Daniela to step outside. She looked at me one final time before she stood. "Claire," she said, "we've been friends since we were 12. "I know," I said. She waited, like that was supposed to be the answer to something. Like the length of the friendship was a counter-argument to what she had done. I know, I said again. That's why I gave you the 30,000 in the first place. She was escorted out. The other 3 tables in the wine bar had gone very quiet. The bartender was studying the inside of a glass with tremendous focus. I sat for a moment in the stillness of it, the exposed brick and the low lighting and the jazz that was still playing because no one had thought to turn it off, and I finished my water. The legal process took 4 months. The criminal charges, identity theft and wire fraud, moved through the system with the kind of efficiency that only happens when the paperwork is airtight. The civil suit I filed separately recovered the $11,300 still in the frozen account, plus damages. Her attorney negotiated a structured restitution agreement for the remainder. The 4 clients were notified. I contacted each of them personally, explained what had happened, and assured them that the contracts they had signed, while improperly executed, would be honored. The restaurant owner, the one from Hailu's Kitchen whose review had been the slip that cracked the case open, told me that the branding work had been beautiful and he was sorry I had been treated that way. I told him it wasn't his fault. He said he knew, but he was sorry anyway. Some people are just like that. The business registration was dissolved. The EIN was canceled. My credit report came back clean. My security clearance was unaffected. I did not attend the sentencing. My attorney went on my behalf. Daniela received a suspended sentence, 3 years of probation, and a restitution order. No jail time, which I had not asked for. I had asked for accountability and repayment. I got both. What I did not get was the friendship back. That was not a legal outcome. That was just a loss. The kind that does not get filed in any database or resolved by any court. The kind you carry around for a while before you figure out what to do with it. My sister called after the sentencing. She asked how I was. I said, I think I'm okay. She said, you are more than okay. You protected yourself and 4 people who didn't even know they needed protecting. I thought about that for a long time afterward, because she was right, and also because it had never occurred to me to frame it that way. I had been so focused on what I had lost. 20 years of friendship, the version of Daniela I thought I knew, the particular kind of ease that comes from being known by someone for that long, that I had not stopped to think about what the work had actually done. It had protected 4 small business owners who had trusted a name they believed was real. It had closed a fraud before it could compound. It had held someone accountable who had made a deliberate choice. I moved into a new apartment in March, smaller than my old place, with a better view and no history attached to it. I bought myself a decent coffee maker and a plant I fully intend to keep alive. I kept the Google alert on my name. I work late most nights still. The cases are never simple, and the paperwork is never fast, and the fraud, as it turns out, is always somewhere if you know how to look for it. But it's quieter now, the kind of quiet that is not empty, the kind that you earn. If you have ever had to protect yourself from someone who counted on you not to, subscribe. You're not alone here.